Dear students, I have come with a new module, Rights of an Unpaid Seller Against the Buyer Personally. We know that rights of an unpaid seller we can divide into two categories. One is rights of an unpaid seller against the buyer personally and against the goods. So the goods we have completed, and now this is the second category, that is rights of an unpaid seller against the buyer personally. Let us look into the details. Now, rights of an unpaid seller against the buyer personally, these rights are called rights in personam. Rights in personam, that is the rights against the buyer, against the person. Whereas rights against the goods, it's called rights in rem. So this is the difference, rights in personam and rights in rem. Now, rights of an unpaid seller against the buyer personally, there are two types of rights. One is where the property has passed and where the property has not passed. That meaning where the seller is keeping the goods and when seller is not keeping the goods. There are two different classifications. Now, first category we will see where the property and goods have passed to the buyer. So what are the rights possible? Now, seller is not having the right of the goods. Goods have already reached the buyer. So what are the rights of the seller? This right is provided as per section 55 of the Sale of Goods Act 1930. The seller can suit for price. The buyer already got the goods. Now the seller can ask for the price. Next is if the buyer refuses to pay, seller can sue him for the price. He can take the matter to the court. Now, if the property has not passed, what are the rights? Even if the property is not passed to the buyer, but if the price is payable on a certain day, as per the contract of sale, buyer has to make the payment because already seller and buyer has entered into agreement. Seller might have made arrangements to send the goods to the buyer. So this is the buyer has to make the payment. It's the duty of the buyer to make the payment on the specified day. Otherwise, seller can sue for him for the price. So both the cases, seller is getting the right to sue for the price. Now, important point you have to remember, in a contract of sale of goods, whether delivery of goods is made or not, it is immaterial. Seller can sue the buyer for the price. So the buyer has to make the price, whether the property and goods is passed to the buyer or not. Seller has got the right to sue the buyer for the price. So this is an important point in sale of goods. Now, where the property has not passed, again some more points we have to learn. One is sued for damages for non-acceptance. See here, first category, property or the goods has passed to the buyer. In the second category, property is not passed to the buyer. Then seller can sue for damages for non-acceptance. Buyer is refusing to accept. Second is repudiation of the contract before due date, or cancellation of the contract or anticipating the contract before the due date. Then sued for interest. So these are the points we are going to explain in detail. Now, first point, sued for damages for non-acceptance. So wrongful neglect or refusal to accept the goods. If the buyer is refusing to accept the goods, on the part of the buyer has to be established. See, seller has to establish that seller is ready to deliver the goods, but buyer is not ready to accept that, or he is neglecting to accept the goods. That the seller has to establish. Damages as per this clause is laid down in sections 73 and 74 of the Indian Contract Act 1872 because it's based on the contractual relationship. Though we are learning about sale of goods, this right is coming as per the Indian Contract Act 1872. Now, how you calculate the damages? If there is an available market for the goods, then damages is equal to contract price minus market price. Now, which is the date we have to calculate the damages? The damages are calculated on the date of breach. Imagine if the difference is nil. There is surplus things available in the market. There is no demand, excess demand for that. So seller will not get any surplus. So what is the difference is nil between contract price and the market price. Seller can get only nominal damages. Whatever the nominal damages, seller can claim from the buyer. Now, if there is no ready market for the goods, that is, damages are decided based on the facts of each case. See, there will not be, if a customized item, there is no ready market. They have to find another buyer who is ready to buy this. So, in this case, one case decision will establish the case Thomson Limited versus Robinson. See, Thomson Limited is a car dealer and Robinson booked one car from the Thomson Limited. What happened? At the time of delivery, when Thomson Limited was ready to deliver the car to Robinson, he refused to accept that. Then how they calculate the damages? This matter went to the court. Then actually there is demand exceeded the supply. There was no excess demand for the car in that market at that time. So how they will calculate damage in this case? So Thomson Limited, the car dealers were allowed profit as damages. That is, the profit is what Thomson Limited bargained with Robinson. At the time, if they are delivering the car to the Robinson, Thomson Limited will get some profit. That profit they are allowed to calculate, they are allowed to take from Robinson, that is the profit. Whatever Robinson was supposed to pay as the car price, and that one component will be the profit. So Robinson was asked to pay the profit to Thomson Limited. So Robinson refused to accept the car. That is how all the confusion started. And even if you had to remember, for customized goods, if you are asking a seller for a customized good, maybe it's a cloth, maybe it's an ornament, and the buyer is refusing to accept that. So the seller can claim full price as damages because they customize the item according to the buyer's requirements. Now, second point we are coming, repudiation of the contract before the due date. If the seller is planning to repudiate the contract, he is not going to fulfill the contract before the date of delivery, the other party can treat the contract as subsisting. The buyer can treat that contract is still valid, but the seller is not going to fulfill the contract. He may not be able to arrange the goods, or he will have some other difficulties in fulfilling the contract. So the buyer will wait till the delivery and sue for damages for the breach of contract. Now seller is at fault, so the buyer is asking for damages. So on the consequences for breach of contract, buyer might have made his own arrangements. He will get the item, he can go ahead with his plan. So the consequences for breach of contract also he can sue from the buyer. Anticipatory breach of contract is also possible, or the buyer can take another action, that is anticipatory breach of contract. Seller is not going to fulfill, so anticipatory breach of contract, either the seller or the buyer can take that. Now the third option is suit for interest. Suit for interest options available. So that specific agreement between buyer and seller for interest. See, in the agreement itself, when they'll enter into contract itself, they will make that there is an option for interest. So interest on the price of goods can be charged from the date of payment because it's as per the agreement. So the conclusion of the contract is also easy. As per the agreement, they have to finalize that. Next is no agreement between buyer and seller. Seller can charge interest on price from the due date or from the date he notifies the buyer about the interest. There is no agreement between seller and buyer about the interest component, but the seller has to inform because they have not fulfilled, the buyer has not accepted the goods. So there is a component of interest the buyer has to pay. So how they will decide the date? One is the date of contract or the due date, or when the seller is informing the buyer about the interest component. From that date, interest calculation will start. Next is, in the absence of any agreement for interest, the court will decide the interest. If there is no agreement about the interest component in the contract, the matter will go to the court and court will decide based on the reasonableness of the facts. So this is what I want to explain in this module. Happy learning. Thank you.